Rebecca Martinez stood at the airlock of the Celestial Forum and took a deep breath before the doors opened to reveal the massive space station that served as neutral ground for the 7 species of the Galactic Coalition. She stepped through, into the grand entrance hall where crystalline walls stretched 30 meters high, and alien beings moved about their business without paying her much attention at first. Then they noticed her. The conversation stopped as multiple species turned to stare at the small human woman, carrying only a single bag and wearing the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. A towering figure approached her with scales that shimmered purple in the station's artificial light and eyes that held no warmth or welcome. This was Commander Thax of the Kryn warrior caste, and he looked down at Rebecca as if she were something small he might accidentally step on. Beside him floated an ethereal being whose body seemed more energy than matter, and whose voice entered Rebecca's mind directly without sound. The Valora ambassador projected thoughts that dripped with condescension as she examined the human like a curious specimen. Behind them lurked something massive and chitinous, whose multiple legs clicked against the metal floor, and whose mandibles moved in a way that made Rebecca deeply uncomfortable. The Drogath representative made a sound that the translator in her ear rendered as a dismissive grunt, followed by something her device struggled to interpret but felt threatening. Commander Thax spoke first in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder, and his words were not encouraging. "You are the representative from Earth, then, and your species wishes to join our coalition despite having barely left your own solar system." The Valora's thoughts invaded her mind again with images of human cities and technology that seemed primitive compared to the wonders of the Forum. "We have observed your kind and find you lacking in both physical capability and mental discipline. So perhaps you should return home before you embarrass yourself further." Rebecca forced herself to smile politely, even as anger burned in her chest, because losing her temper would only confirm their prejudices. "I appreciate your concern, but humanity has much to offer, and I look forward to demonstrating our value through cooperation and mutual understanding." The Drogath made that sound again, and this time the translator provided context that suggested humans might serve better as a protein source than as partners. Thax gestured dismissively toward a corridor that led deeper into the station, where Rebecca would find her assigned quarters, far from the areas where important species conducted their business. She took her bag and walked with her head high past aliens who whispered among themselves about the audacity of such a weak species, thinking they belonged among the stars. Her quarters were small and sparse compared to the luxury suites given to other ambassadors, but Rebecca had expected nothing better on her first day. She unpacked her belongings and reviewed the data files about each species, trying to understand their cultures and find common ground that might bridge the gap between their views and reality. Days passed in a blur of meetings where other diplomats spoke over her, or ignored her suggestions while treating human achievements as accidents rather than accomplishments. The Valora insisted that human art and music were crude imitations of what truly civilized species created over millennia of refinement. The Kryn laughed at human martial prowess and suggested that even their weakest children could defeat humanity's strongest warriors. The Drogath simply stared at her with those multifaceted eyes and made sounds that the translator rendered as various descriptions of how humans might taste. Rebecca endured it all with patience and professionalism, because she knew that changing minds required time and opportunity. The opportunity came on the 7th day of her posting, when alarms suddenly screamed throughout the station and the lights shifted to emergency red. Her translator exploded with panicked voices in multiple languages as the station's systems announced a meteor strike that had breached the hull in 3 locations. Rebecca ran toward the command center where chaos reigned as different species argued about evacuation protocols while injured aliens lay bleeding on the floor. The Valora had retreated into protective meditation to shield their delicate energy forms from the trauma. The Kryn warriors were suiting up in combat armor, as if they could fight the vacuum of space itself. The Drogath had sealed themselves in, their section of the station following hive protocols that prioritized their collective over individuals from other species. Rebecca pushed through to the damage control station where holographic displays showed sections of the Forum losing atmosphere and structural integrity by the second. She studied the readouts with the quick analytical mind that had made her a successful xenobiologist and began formulating a plan while others still argued. The medical bay was cut off with wounded personnel trapped inside, and the automatic bulkheads had sealed them in with failing life support. The engineering section had lost its entire crew when the hull breach occurred, and the backup systems needed manual activation to prevent catastrophic power failure. A dozen other problems demanded immediate attention, but Rebecca knew she had to prioritize based on lives at risk and cascade failures that could doom the entire station. She grabbed a pressure suit from the emergency locker and began checking seals while Commander Thax finally noticed her preparations. "What do you think you are doing, human, because this situation requires warriors, not fragile diplomats, who will only become another casualty." Rebecca sealed her helmet and looked up at the towering Kryn warrior with eyes that held no fear or doubt. "I am going to save lives, starting with the medical bay, then moving to engineering before this station tears itself apart, while everyone argues about protocol." She moved toward the sealed corridor before Thax could object, and overrode the safety locks that prevented access to the damaged sections. The corridor beyond was a nightmare of twisted metal and floating debris, where atmosphere vented through cracks in the hull that grew larger with each passing moment. Rebecca pulled herself along using handholds and magnetic boots while her suit's sensors screamed warnings about radiation and structural instability all around her. She reached the medical bay bulkhead and examined the manual override panel that had been damaged in the initial impact. Her training in field repairs came back as she pulled tools from her suit's utility belt and began jury-rigging a solution using wire and determination. The panel sparked and protested but finally responded as she bypassed the damaged circuits and got the door moving on its emergency track. Inside the medical bay, she found 6 aliens of different species huddled together, while oxygen levels dropped toward critical and their breathing became labored. Rebecca helped them into emergency suits and led them back through the dangerous corridor, while keeping everyone calm with steady instructions and encouragement. She delivered the survivors to the command center where other aliens stared in amazement that the small human had accomplished what they had deemed impossible. But Rebecca had no time for congratulations because the engineering section still needed attention, and every second counted. She returned to the damaged corridors and made her way deeper into the station where the breach had caused the most severe structural damage. The engineering section was worse than the medical bay, with complete atmosphere loss and debris that had killed 3 technicians instantly. Rebecca navigated the floating bodies with respect, but focused on reaching the manual backup systems that could stabilize power before the fusion reactors scrammed. She worked with practiced efficiency, pulling panels and rerouting connections while her suit's air supply dropped steadily toward dangerous levels. The systems fought her at every step because they were designed for the Valora's telepathic interface, not for manual override by someone working in a pressure suit. Rebecca adapted and improvised using techniques she had learned fixing equipment in Earth's orbital stations, where nothing ever worked perfectly and creativity was essential. Finally, the power system stabilized and the backup generators kicked in, providing life support to sections that had been minutes from complete failure. She turned to leave, but her motion brought her face to face with Commander Thax, who had followed her into the damaged section wearing his combat armor. The Kryn warrior stood trapped under a support beam that had collapsed across his legs, and even his species' legendary strength could not lift it. He looked at Rebecca with something between shame and resignation, because Kryn culture viewed asking for help as weakness. Rebecca did not wait for him to ask, but immediately assessed the situation and formulated a plan using physics rather than brute force. She found a length of intact support strut and positioned it as a lever using debris as a fulcrum point at precisely the right angle. Her small human frame pulled on the improvised lever with every ounce of strength she possessed, and the beam shifted just enough. Thax pulled himself free and stared at the human woman who had saved him using intelligence and determination, where his superior strength had failed. They returned to the command center together, and Rebecca immediately began coordinating additional repairs while other aliens watched her with new respect. But the crisis was not over because sensors detected another problem in the Drogath section, where one of their kind was trapped in a collapsed chamber. The insectoid species had sealed their SE,